Hello and welcome back to the beach. It's currently the same night as last week's video, but I've just come across something that I thought would make a really interesting video in itself. So I'm going to film this video as a little extra for you this week, and it's all about these dull grey nights, but the positivity and the great thing about coming out to shoot at low tides on a dull grey night like tonight. And it's all about textures and patterns in the sand. And what I hope to show you in this video is the amazing effect that getting out on a dull night, coming down the coast and utilising the low tide shapes and textures can give you some really interesting photographic opportunities to make the most of those nights where you're expecting or hoping for an epic sunset and you don't get it. You can go home with something that you will be satisfied and happy with. That's what this video is about. So let's go and I'll showcase to you what I mean by these textures and patterns and how this light is perfect for this type of photography. So the tide is currently still going out. We've got half an hour until complete low tide. But because it's the evening, there's not many people on the beach and I've pretty much got it to myself. There's just me and a friend over there doing photography, and everyone that was here swimming and walking the dog has now gone home for the evening. So what that means is this beach, apart from our footprints, is pretty much pristine. And because of that, it opens up this new magical world of textures and patterns, of pools of water and sandbanks that are completely pristine. There's no footprints on them, and it opens up for some great photographic opportunities. And what I've been doing is, as you can see behind me, there's a really big pool of water that's been created, and this reminds me so much of an epic sunrise shoot I had at Fraserburgh last year at sunrise, when I had a pool of water almost identical to this, with this epic fog rolling out to sea and over the sunrise. It was one of the most incredible mornings of photography I've ever had, and this is why I felt so inspired by this evening, because this pool of water would have made for an epic landscape shot if we had the light. But we don't quite have that light, but there's still time for it to happen. But if it doesn't, I want to utilise this. So what I'm doing is I'm using the outside of this pool of water. So on the outside you've obviously got what I'm standing on just now, which is these lines in the sand with water within them, and then you've got the more subtle lines of the sand underneath the shallow water. And it's giving me really good opportunities to get abstract style images of the patterns and the textures. And the great thing about dull overcast nights like tonight is you've got no harsh shadows, you've got very little contrast, you've got no harsh highlights coming from the sunlight. All you've got is this very subtle light that is evenly spread over these ruts and shapes in the sand, but there's just enough light and definition to give you a very slight shadow. Nothing that you would have got if the sun was out, but just that very slight shadow, which means exposing in these images is very easy, and getting nice, flat, crisp, clean abstract shots is really easy to achieve. It's all about looking for the direction of the textures and the patterns and your composition to get good shots. So let's head over to the pool of water itself, and I'll talk you through exactly what I mean by getting the textures and that in the right composition to make it interesting. So what I like to do here is this sort of area here where we've got the more defined lines is quite a common thing for people to shoot. You know, to find that textures, that patterns, have the water around them to add interest. But what I find makes better images is when you have a big pool of water like this one, and you get really near the edge of it, and you see you've got these still little bits of lines within the sand here and textures, but they're much more submerged in the water. And what that gives them, when you shoot that, when you've only got really small bits, the tips of them coming out of the water, what that gives you is a much more dreamy and subtle looking image, which can just look really calming and interesting. And because you've not got so much of the pattern and the clump of sand coming out of the water, it gives you a much cleaner image as well. Like if you look here, these bits are very defined, there's a lot going on. You can shoot them and get really interesting abstract shots, of course you can, but because there's not that much water around them, they're very kind of harsh and defined. Whereas when you come here, look how much more subtle they are, and they just give you a, like I said, a much more dreamlike composition, which really ties in well with the abstract and the textures and the patterns. But it's all about deciding actually, when you know you're doing photography, what mood are you trying to portray. And when I think about this, I normally think about what the weather's doing. So this evening it is flat calm, as you can see, complete flat calm. There's not a breath of wind in the air, and when you're out on evenings like this, it's very calming. You know, you've got the subtle waves crashing behind you or lapping into shore, because it's not stormy, so they're not crashing, but you know what I mean. And then you've got these lovely pools of water that are so pristine and still because there's not a breath of wind in the air. So if I was shooting today on a harsh, windy, stormy day, I'd be focusing probably more on these because they give you much more of a harsher, defined image. But because it is so calm, I want to utilise that. And by getting closer to the water, the soothing, calming effect of the water allows me to get those abstract shots that tell a story of the calming nature that we've got here tonight. So yeah, I'll share some of the images I've shot with you just now if I haven't already, and you can just see hopefully how using the bits of these textures so close to the water's edge gives you that calming feeling. So I did say to you I was going to speak to you a little bit about composition, and how your composition when you shoot images like this is really important, as it is in all aspects of photography. But often when people shoot textures and patterns, you're looking for simplicity within your image. So if I was to take a wide angle shot just now of all of this, I could get an interesting image depending on how I shot it. But what I like to do is think about some of the composition techniques that you're kind of taught when you begin photography, and how I can use them alongside the patterns to create interest within my images. So looking back at those images I just shot, you will see that a number of them I've included the lines within them as diagonals. So you've got this nice diagonal line going through the image and coming out of one of the corners of the frame, which just allows for a really pleasing composition going through the frame. I've also made use of using odd numbers. So a number of those images I shot where there was 3 lines of the texture, and again, odd numbers for some reason look a lot more pleasing in photography in many respects. You know, if you're shooting trees, for instance, 1 tree or 3 trees often look much better than 2 or 4. So having that in your image and using odd numbers, again, it's allowing that more pleasing look within the image. So when you're looking at taking texture shots like this, it's about thinking about A, the story, B, the light, C, the composition techniques, and D, utilising the mood of the night alongside the composition to create your images. Again, you know, of course, the more emotive an image is, the more crisper and cleaner it is, the more visually appealing it is, the better your shot. It goes for all kind of genres of photography. But with abstract particularly, often you're looking for simplicity. You're looking for using the textures and patterns around you to create that simple, calming, interesting image that's a little bit different, but that's interesting. And like I say, on nights like tonight, it's perfect for doing this type of photography. It just gives you something else to play around with so that you don't always feel disappointed when you don't get the sunset or sunrise that you'd envisaged. There's always other things you can shoot.